And let's go to our US correspondent, Nick Harper, who's joining us on the line. Nick, good evening and welcome. What's the mood like in Washington right now?
Good evening. Yeah, it's certainly been a very eventful day in Washington, D.C. That mood certainly of celebration, but I would say something of a muted celebration compared to inaugurations in the past. Of course, this inauguration coming at a time when 400,000 Americans have died as a result of COVID-19. And President Biden, in his inauguration address, took a moment of silence to honour those people who had died during the course of the pandemic. We're also seeing far less people on the streets of Washington, D.C. Those restrictions in place because of the pandemic, but also because of security fears in the run-up to this inauguration. We've had 25,000 National Guard out on the streets of the Capitol, essentially locking down that Capitol Hill area where that swearing-in ceremony took place just a couple of hours ago, keeping the public back, keeping any potential protesters back. And it has been a calm event. There hasn't been any trouble, as was feared, in the run-up to this. But the mood's certainly very different because this is an inauguration like none other as a result of the pandemic and as a result of those potential security threats.
Mm-hmm. And quite evident from Joe Biden's speech there as well that he is, one would argue, a president who has a duty of uniting Americans, and him also saying that I am a president of all Americans, and not saying including Donald Trump, but that's a fact, including Donald Trump. And Donald Trump does have his own supporters as well. But what does this mean, and how will he be able to unite Americans considering how divided they were, as seen even on the 6th of January?
Yeah, that speech was certainly not pulling any punches. Joe Biden acknowledging the serious crises that he's currently facing, the health crisis of the pandemic, the economic fallout crisis that was caused by the pandemic, and that social crisis where we're seeing the political divisions in the United States at their most extreme. He realized that he needs to bring the country together, and that's why we heard two words time and time again during the course of that 21-minute speech: unity and democracy. Unity, calling for everyone to come together, even if they didn't vote for him, he said. And there were 75 million people who certainly didn't vote for him, voting for President Trump. And also democracy, because he acknowledged that democracy in the US has been challenged, not just by the storming of Capitol Hill 2 weeks ago, but the continued pushing of baseless claims by the Republicans and Donald Trump leading the charge over the last 2 months since the election that it was an illegitimate election, that it was rigged by the Democrats, that they fraudulently stole it. But Joe Biden said that democracy had been tested and democracy had prevailed. So very much a domestic issue, a domestic speech, telling people that it is time to turn the page and asking them to give him a chance to be a president for not just Democrats, but for Republicans, for Americans at large.
What about domestic terrorism? And how divided, as I said earlier on, America was seen to be on the 6th of January.
Yeah, the 6th of January, those type of scenes are something that the US has not seen in living modern history. The storming of the Capitol building, the last time that it was overrun was back in 1814, more than 200 years ago. Incredible scenes. And yes, that threat of domestic terrorism, that there were people who were planting pipe bombs on the day at the Democrat headquarters, at the Republican headquarters, on top of all of those protesters who were rioting and storming Capitol Hill. The FBI put out warnings in the run-up to the inauguration that extremist groups in the US were planning attacks not just on Washington, D.C., but in every one of the 50 US states on the Capitol buildings there. Thankfully, it has passed off peacefully. We haven't seen any of those potential problems that were being discussed on online chat forums by those extremist groups. But bear in mind, that is not the end. Just because we've had the inauguration and a new president has been sworn in, it doesn't mean that the problems are fixed. And there's a big question mark as to how long the security in Washington, D.C. will remain. We are under a state of emergency. That's due to end tomorrow on the 21st of January. But will it be extended? Will the offences come down? How quickly will the National Guard leave the streets? There's still that threat, and it's still persistent.
So Trump, in one of his final speeches, said that we will be back. He told his supporters. But then on the other end, you have the impeachment trial. How do you think this would play out?
Well, look, the shadow of President Trump is not going to go away anytime soon. He's threatening to see us all again soon. Those were his final remarks. He's gone down to his estate in Mar-a-Lago. Question marks as to whether he may start a new party. The Wall Street Journal has been reporting he might try and create a third political party to rival the Republican Party. He may start a news channel, it has been rumoured as well. And yes, the impeachment also. Donald Trump will be front and centre in headlines for some time. That impeachment trial is probably on pause for now because Joe Biden needs to get his cabinet confirmed, something that hasn't happened yet. It would normally have happened by now. The impeachment trial is likely to be held back, but it will take place at some point, even though there are legal question marks as to whether it's constitutional to have an impeachment trial for a president who has already left office, considering the end result of a guilty verdict would be to remove the president. That can't happen. He's already left office. But yes, Donald Trump, in one form or another, will still be a name that's very much on everyone's lips for some time to come.
Oh, thank you so much for that. That is Nick Harper joining us from Washington. As you see also there on the side of the screen, live visuals coming out of Washington, D.C.